So originally today I had a reading vlog planned for you, but I've decided to shuttle that onto Thursday, and you'll get my Wicked Picks My TBR on Thursday. Today I thought we could talk about the Goodreads Awards, which have just dropped. I'm going to go through them and I'm going to react to them as I read them, see what I think. Let me know whether you agree with me or whether you don't agree with me. I'm going to screen record it. Hopefully it's going to line up really well. Fingers crossed. And let me know your thoughts in the comments. So here we have the landing page for the awards. And looking at the categories just to start off with, I'm both not surprised and a little bit disappointed in the categories that we are getting this year. Romantasy, I think, is still a huge trend, and Goodreads does tend to be a popularity contest in the sense of the things that, even the categories, are the things that are selling. I don't think Romantasy is going anywhere, at least in the next couple of years. None of the other genres are a surprise. It would be surprising if they'd got rid of any, I think. This looks to be the exact same set as we had last year. There's been nothing added, which is where my disappointment lies. I still think that it is ridiculous that we don't have any award category for anything in an age bracket lower than young adult. We don't have any middle grade, we don't have any picture books, board books, young reader books, whatever you want to call them. We don't have anything younger than young adult, especially, and obviously we'll look at the books in a minute, but especially where in recent years young adult has been skewing older and older. So to then not have anything even intended for readers younger than young adult, but which would probably catch some of those lower young adult readers, it feels like it's a real, I don't know, missed opportunity or slight, but I really do think we need to bring back at least a general children's category, if not middle grade and picture book. And that's as someone who doesn't read middle grade, and certainly not anything lower than that. It's not that it's something I personally would be reading or personally would have any stakes in voting for, but I just think it's a bit ridiculous that we are eliminating everyone in those categories from the awards. Similarly, I'm a bit disappointed that the graphic novel category is not being brought back. Including graphic novels in with the novels for their categories, I think is a disservice to both graphic novels and full novels. I think last year we saw that Heartstopper won the Young Adult Award, and Heartstopper's brilliant, but I do think there is such a difference in the art form, in the media of graphic novel versus novel, that it feels almost silly to compare the two. I think we should have a category that is entirely for graphic novels, that takes into account art styles and the way that, especially if it's something that's been adapted, the way that's been done. I don't see why we don't have more categories, because the Goodreads Awards, unlike other ones, you don't have a judging panel. You're not giving a group of in-demand people in the industry. You're not giving them a whole batch of books to read through. Once the selection process is done, once this round has been decided, the voting is entirely Goodreads users. So I don't see what it costs them in terms of time or effort to offer more categories, more awards. It's not like there's a big prize that they need to fund. It's purely bragging rights. But we do have the 15 categories. So where I'm going to start is these bottom 3 categories, because quite honestly these are the 3 that I know I won't have read anything in. So these are the ones that I'm just going to be able to go, if I've seen it around, if I've seen a lot of hype for this book, it's probably going to do fairly well. So jumping into non-fiction, okay, there's a good mix, I think, in terms of the non-fiction here. There's quite a lot on, I want to say, kind of sociological, cultural issues. There's a couple that are current event topics. One that really catches my eye in terms of things I think might win would be The Let Them Theory by Mel Robbins. I've been seeing this everywhere, and I do think that self-help books tend to do quite well in these awards. I personally don't read self-help books. I don't like self-help books. I've never read one that I thought gave anything like what the time it takes to read them. But they do tend to be very popular. They do tend to get a lot of readers. People that don't read anything else, I think, tend to still read self-help. That's not that people that read self-help don't read anything else, but you know what I'm saying. I think they hit a bigger, broader audience, and that obviously factors into how many votes they're going to get. So I would peg this as at least getting through. I want to say it's probably one of the ones I would think will get to the final round, if not win the entire game. Personally, the one I would be most interested in reading, okay, there's two I would be interested in. The No More Tears, The Dark Secrets of Johnson & Johnson by Gardiner Harris sounds very interesting. I would probably pick that one up if I was looking for non-fiction. Obviously, Everything is Tuberculosis by John Green. Deadliest Infections, it's topical, but I think a lot of people maybe will be avoiding books that are about disease and infection still. So that might not get as many readers, although it is very highly rated. The one that I have been most tempted to pick up myself, the one that I have seen in my library quite a few times, and I've actually picked it up off the shelf and put it back, but the one that if I was going to read any book on this list, the one that I've already been tempted to read here is One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This by Omar El Akid. I've seen it everywhere. I think this one will be one that people will vote for because they're interested in reading it as much as because they have read it. So I think One Day Everyone Will Have Always Been Against This and The Let Them Theory are my two top picks for what will actually win. And if I had to pick, I would choose not the self-help one. So then I think we'll click on memoir. Again, not something I usually read or ever read, but we'll see what we have here. Right off the top, I think the Kamala Harris one is going to do well. There's going to be a lot of people that have read that. The Elizabeth Gilbert one, I think I've heard people talk about. I think it's a little bit controversial, so it might be interesting enough that it goes through. Personally, I would be interested in reading Tim Curry's memoir. I think that he's fascinating. He's a fantastic artist, fantastic actor. That would be probably maybe the one so far that I personally would pick up. I don't know how popular that would be. Cher, again, probably going to be really popular. Huge celebrity. Lots of fans will be picking it up and voting for it. People that like Cher will probably vote for it even if they've not read it yet, if they don't have another option. Tina Knowles, again, probably a really popular book. Lots of interesting stories potentially in that. So again, more people picking it up, more people likely to vote for it. And yeah, so there's a lot of big celebrity names here. The one though that I think will win will be the Epstein book. Virginia Roberts Giuffre, I think this will win. I think it will be the one that most people are interested in reading. I think it's really topical. I think a lot of people will vote for it because it's about a harsh topic. There's a level of bravery in writing about it that I think people will relate to. It actually doesn't have as many ratings itself as I would have thought, but I think this one is the one I would pick for winning in terms of worthiness and award winningness, whereas maybe something like Cher or the Kamala Harris will be the ones that maybe generate more popular interest. History and biography are an interesting batch. Again, much like the non-fiction category, this is quite a good mix. We have lots of different topics being covered. I think the Mark Twain one by Ron Chernow is a fairly safe bet. Obviously, he wrote Hamilton. I think people will pick that up that have read his Hamilton memoir, and then that might be something to continue with. Personally, the one I would be most interested in would be this Jane Austen's bookshelf. If I was going to pick any book from here, that's probably the one I would pick up. Cure for Women also looks interesting. I don't think there's any here that I have particularly seen that have made it, that have been so popular they've made it through into my very, very fiction world view. I think I recognise this one, The Original Sins by Eve Ewing, so maybe that one. What I am noticing is how few ratings most of these have in comparison to the fiction books, which I find a little surprising. Surely in the bookstores I go into, at least, that sell non-fiction, the non-fiction tends to be the bigger section of the bookstore. Maybe that means there's more competition, but for these ones that are up for the Goodreads Award, I find some of these ratings really, really low, or not the ratings, but the number of ratings, I guess, compared to some of the other ones. But yeah, my pick for this for winning is probably going to be Mark Twain or Baldwin. I could maybe see that one doing well as well. I think Mark Twain, but my personal interest would be this Jane Austen one. So those are the three categories where, like, honestly, I don't really know much. I don't expect my opinion to hold much water. So we'll go back and we'll look at the other choices. So this is the general fiction section. This is not one of my most picked up genres, but I do occasionally dip into more general fiction. The one that I have by far and large seen the most kind of hype around, and the one that I personally am the most interested in, is the Frederick Backman book. I've absolutely loved his A Man Called Ove and his My Grandmother Sends Her Regards and Apologizes is what I read it as, but I think it also gets translated to My Grandmother Told Me to Tell You She's Sorry. Both of those big weepy books, A+. And I've heard from people that have read, my friends, that they think this is his best book. So if it's better than those two, I can't see why it wouldn't be award winning. So historical fiction, the one that I think has been the most hyped on my feed, and the only one here I've read, is Atmosphere by Taylor Jenkins Reid. However, I don't think it's her best book, and when I've talked to other people about it, they don't think it's her best book. So I don't know that necessarily the votes. It does have a high rating, so you can't fault it, and I mean, look at the number of ratings, it's massive. So I think you have to at least consider that this is going to get into the final round. But I also have seen quite a lot of interest in this one by Sarah Penner, The Amalfi Curse. So maybe those two. And then personally, I'm quite interested in this title here, The Book Club for Troublesome Women. That's interesting, and I do think that books about books, books about readers, books about book clubs always tend to do quite well. Dissatisfied 60s era housewives, again, that might be something that I think that one will go through. I would also personally be really interested in this one. We have The Stolen Queen by Fiona Davis, who didn't have their Egyptology phase. There's going to be some interest there, I think. I'm not as confident that that one would go through though, at least to the final round, but I personally would maybe pick that one up. And this looks interesting as well. Again, I think books about witches and witchcraft trials tend to be popular, so that could be a success too. I think this is a really solid category actually, the historical fiction this year. There's quite a lot that I could see being the winner, and no one that massively stands out to me. Atmosphere does stand out in terms of, I think, the amount of publicity, the amount of hype, the number of ratings, But the Amalfi Curse isn't that far behind it in number of ratings once you get to that kind of scale, so maybe. Yeah, if I had to put money on a winner, I would say Atmosphere. But I wouldn't be surprised if I was surprised, shall we say. So, mystery and thriller. And this is an interesting category. It's very much, I would say personally, as a cozy mystery reader, the mystery and thriller is, as it always is, much more weighted towards thriller than your traditional mysteries. I know it's a fine line sometimes, but I would say this is by and large much more thriller. Frida McFadden is killing it. I mean, she's got The Crash, The Tenant, and then I thought I saw, yeah, and The Intruder are all in it. So she has 3 books, which just in terms of numbers, I think you have to say that there's a good chance Frida McFadden, for whichever book, might win. Richard Osman is, again, I think, a really good contender. His books are so popular, and specifically this one is the 5th in the Thursday Murder Club. People that have stuck with the series that long, I think, are very likely to read that. It also might have a lot of new readers because the movie came out this year of the first book, so that could be quite fresh in people's minds. This is one I've heard a lot of people that have read it enjoy, but I don't know that it's popular enough to compete with things like Frida McFadden. The John Grisham novel, The Widow, here is actually the one I am the most interested in picking up, which is really unusual for me because it's not my type of mystery. This is I think it's a courtroom drama, but I've never read John Grisham before, and I think if I was going to, this is the one I would try. I've actually bookmarked this on my libraries app. I'm tempted to get a hold of it myself at some point. So for my own tastes, I would like this one to get further through. I would like it to maybe win because it's the one I'm most likely to pick up. John Grisham, again, is a well-known author that I think will have a good set of readers that he appeals to no matter what he writes. And then again, even the ones that maybe I don't think are as popular are still fairly popular. We have a Karen Slaughter here, we have the new Holly Jackson, which I've heard very good things about. The Reese Witherspoon and Harlan Corbin book, I mean, I don't know that I've heard great things, but it's Reese Witherspoon. People might have picked it up. You Killed Me First, again, I've heard good things, but the rating isn't quite as high as some of the others. It does have a lot of ratings though, which obviously affects how many votes it'll get. I think this is a really tight category. I think the Frida McFadden, I don't know, I mean, should they maybe have a limit to how many books can be submitted from one author? There's a lot here, and I think it would be really hard at this stage necessarily to pick a definite winner here. I do think it'll go more thriller than the John Grisham is that kind of legal courtroom one. The Vera Wong's Guide to Snooping is much closer to a cozy. Richard Osman, again, is closer to a cozy, more in that just traditional type of mystery. I think it'll be a thriller that wins, but I could be surprised. And then we have, so romance. Emily Henry, Lauren Asher, Ali Hazelwood, all very popular, very solid choices. A couple of different ones here. First Time Caller by B.K. Borison, I think, is a shoo-in for getting to the final round. I've seen it all over my feed. Everyone that's read it seems to love it. I think that will be successful. We also have obviously Anna Huang, Lucy Score are both popular. Abby Jimenez, Megan Quinn. This again is a really stacked lineup. There's none. I don't think there's any here that I would say, I definitely don't think that's potential. Elsie Silver. Interestingly, we have 2 Brynne Weaver books We have Tourist Season, the Seasons of Carnage trilogy #1, and then did I not see... Oh, it's right next to it, yeah. And then we have Scythe and Sparrow, which is the Ruinous Love trilogy. So we've got 2 Bryn Weathers here. But we also, yeah, have 2 Ali Hazelwoods, because there's Deep End, which is that the further out one. The most recent one is Problematic Summer Romance, maybe. So again, we've got 2 from each of those authors, so they have double the chance of winning. There's just, this is a really stacked set of really popular books, and I think romance gets those really passionate readers that really advocate for their favourite authors. So I think this will be a popular category. The one that I personally have enjoyed the most, have read, is The Favourites by Lane Fargo. This is Wuthering Heights with ice dancing and the Olympics. I really enjoyed this book. I do think it's the least... It is a romance, it absolutely is, but I would say that the romance is the B plot and the A plot is the skating and the character's ambition. It's probably the least romancy of the romance books, whereas a lot of these fall almost more into that slightly rom-com type. I think The Favourites sit somewhere on a borderline between romance and maybe just going into the general fiction category. So as much as I love this, and I saw so much hype around it when it came out, I'm not sure that one will do as well as it maybe deserves, just because I don't think it fits this kind of romance category's mold quite as well as the rest. So Romantasy, which I do like that they've got romance, romantasy, fantasy. Just, it's a nice order. Silver Elite. I mean, yes, romantasy I guess maybe is the best category for it, but is it not more dystopian and therefore it's more science fiction romance? I don't know, because I've not read it. Emily Wilde, solid bet. Accomplice to the Villain, probably a good bit as well. Night in the Moth, I think will be really successful. Again, this is a really popular category. There's a lot of books in here that I could easily see winning it. The new Clarissa Broadbent, Witch's Guide to Magical Innkeeping. I don't think that hit quite the same way the first book did. So, Dire Brown. Yeah, a lot of really popular books here, which is good because then there's at least a level of competition. You don't have one popular book and some that were under the radar. These are all really popular books. Another Ali Hazelwood. I don't think we have any doubles of a specific author in here though. Onyx Storm, I would have said, like before the year started, I would have said this was an absolute shoo-in. Not a doubt in my mind that Onyx Storm would win, but the reviews I saw of it were really mixed, so I don't know whether people might pick other books, just maybe like constantly thinking of it as the second option and something else will win. I think it'll go through for sure, but I don't think it's as much of a shoo-in as it maybe was before it came out. Shield of Sparrows I've heard nothing but good things for. I don't know that it's got the numbers in comparison to some of these other ones, but I have heard it is incredible, so I would imagine the people that have read it are going to vote for it. Jasmine Mass. I read the first one and it'll be interesting to see what the numbers were on the first Blood of Hercules book, and then who went through to read the second one, because that's a really high rating. Enchantra, obviously, like Phantasma, has been really big. I actually think the safest bets here for the actual winner are, I was going to say the 3, but maybe the 2 Dramione books. Rose in Chains by Julie Soto and Alchemized by Senlin Yu. I think just level of publicity they've had, level of hype that's been around them, I imagine that one of these is going to do really, really well. The Rachel Gillig, maybe I would toss in there too, along with Emily Wilde and Clarissa Broadbent maybe. Silver Elite, this is a weird one because it does have a massive amount of ratings. It has a really high rating overall, but I don't know personally. I very rarely see people talk about it, and so again it might be that thing of there's just something you'd be more passionate about when it came to picking one thing to vote for. I'm gonna say these two Hermione's, Onyx Storm, Shield of Sparrows, Emily Wilde, Night in the Moth, Lunar Spotting. It's a really good batch though. I think they all, apart from, like I say, I'm not completely sure I would put Silver Elite in here, but I don't know where else I would put it, because I think if you put it in sci-fi, people will object to that too. But other than that, I think they're all really, really solid examples of their genre. Whether you read the genre, like the genre, whatever, that's a different kind of debate. So into the solidly fantasy books, and this is another really stacked category. A lot of really, really big names here. Well, Brandon Sanderson, this book particularly, Wind and Truth, I don't know that I've heard a lot about, but there are people who are going to vote because it's Brandon Sanderson, so he's probably going through. Similar to Joe Abercrombie, I think he's going to go through. Bury Our Bones in the Midnight Soil. V.E. Schwab again is a really, really safe bet. I don't know that I heard as much kind of unanimous praise for Bury Our Bones as I did for Addie LaRue, so that, you know, there's a comparison issue there where if you loved Addie, would you vote for this one? If you didn't love it as much, I don't know. The Everlasting, again, I've only heard good things, but I've not heard about it as much. The River Has Roots I've read, Bury Our Bones I've read. Hemlock and Silver is on my TBR. I don't think T. Kingfisher is quite up to competing with some of these other massive names. The Raven Scholar I have seen everywhere, and I've seen everyone that's read it adore it. Again though, newer author, whether that impacts. Stephanie Garber, this book, considering it's Stephanie Garber, I've seen around but not really heard people talking about, or at least not raving about. Watermoon, I saw a lot of really, really mixed reviews on Watermoon, so I'm probably going to say no on that one. The Strength of the Few I find really interesting because it is literally just out, like literally just out. I think though, considering how much anticipation I've seen for The Strength of the Few, how much love there was for The Will of the Many, although I personally didn't love it, I think that this is definitely a shoo-in. Because I'm assuming that even people that haven't got around to reading it yet might vote for it on the basis of how much they want to read it, how much they're looking forward to reading it. If everyone plays by the rules and only votes for things they've read, then maybe it won't because it's not been out as long, but I suspect that's going to at least get through to the finals. I would also put The Raven Scholar in there just from sheer hype. Maybe a drop of Corruption. Catabasis, whatever we're calling it. I think it's got that real award winner feel to it, and I mean, the rating's not great. I think it did struggle. People struggled with this one more than I think with her other books. So maybe not, maybe people will pick something else. I definitely think this one will get into the final, even though the rating is lower. I think it'll get through. And then, like I say, I would put Strength of the Few, The Raven Scholar, the Brandon Sanderson, and maybe the V.E. Schwab as my kind of final top picks. The one I am most excited about reading is The Raven Scholar. I haven't got to it yet, but I am really excited about that one. And also Hemlock and Silver. It's not the Tea Kingfisher I've been the most excited to read, but I am always interested in Tea Kingfisher. Of the books I've read here, I don't know that any of them are ones I would want to vote for particularly. They've not been ones I've loved. So if I was going to vote, it would probably be more of a speculative vote. Science fiction. Oofed. There's really different types of books here, which I think is the problem with science fiction. It can be such a range. Adrian Tchaikovsky, in terms of author recognition. Oh, and here we have, there's 2 John Scalzi books here again. When the Moon Hits Your Eye, I read. I thought it was okay. I didn't love it, but I do think it was one that quite a lot of people read. So of the 2, that's the one I would peg for going through if it was one of them. I'm really excited to read Of Monsters and Mainframes. It's a Dracula retelling with a sentient spaceship. That's the one I would pick as my most interested in. Hamajang Luck, again, I am intrigued by, and I've heard really good things actually. I've heard much better things than this rating implies. So I think that one might go through. I think from what I have seen of the sci-fi kind of hype, Death of the Author is a shoo-in compared to everything else, but I could be wrong. It's been out a fair while and sometimes that works against it as well, but I do think it is by far the one that I've seen the most discussion around, I've seen the most people talk about. I love the horror category even when I don't read it, because it always feels such fun. And actually I have, for once, I can actually say I've read a few of these. Like, I would actually have a choice to make. And interestingly, I would say we do have a Stephen King, because of course we have a Stephen King. But I think there are other books here that I think are more likely to go through, that are more likely to win than Stephen King. I'd be surprised actually if Stephen King goes through to the final round when you see the competition here. The Lamb, I've heard good things. I've heard amazing things about The Buffalo Hunter. You Weren't Meant to Be Human was the one that I am the most intrigued by. It's the one that I actually pre-ordered. I've loved Andrew Joseph White's YA books, but the more I see people talking about You Weren't Meant to Be Human, the more I think that a lot of readers might be in the same boat as me here. We're really excited, but the specific tropes and the specific triggers that are in this one are things that they intimidate me, and the book is gonna sit on my shelf for a long time until something pushes me to try it. And I think a lot of people might be in that same boat, that they have been talking about it, they've been hyped about it, and then we're bottling it a little bit. So I don't know about that one, despite how much kind of love I've seen for the author and the idea. Rachel Harrison, This Play Nice, I've seen a lot. The Possession of Alba Diaz, again, I've seen a lot. It is a stunning cover, to be fair. The Mona Awad book. Hungerstone, it did well, I think. But something, I don't know, that one for me, I felt that it wasn't, there wasn't enough vampires in my vampire book. And I think for horror voters, something else will pip it to the post. Similar with Lucky Day, I enjoyed it, but it didn't feel particularly horrific to me, and my standards are a lot lower than your average horror reader. So if I didn't think it was a super horror book, then not that it needs to be super horrific to be a good horror book, but I think Bury Your Gaze was a better novel. Grady Hendrix obviously is a fairly safe bet because he's popular, but he does seem to split people, and that's what I've found, is I've not actually enjoyed Grady Hendrix books. When the Wolf Comes Home, Nat Cassidy is an author I have seen really explode this year. I know this isn't his debut, I know he's got other books, but the other books have been really popular too. It seems to be a kind of sleeper success. I think this is a really fair, like a really safe bet, at least in going through to the final round. Sylvia Marina Garcia, yeah, she's had a lot of books out, she's a big name, I love Mexican Gothic, but The Bewitching I don't feel has had as much hype around it. The one I'm most interested to read, and I have heard good things, better than these ratings, is Blood on Her Tongue by Joanna Van Veen. That one for me is definitely one on my TBR. But the one I think I would peg as the winner, and this is a much shakier peg than some of the other ones, I would say Bat Eater and Other Names for Cora Zheng. I think that one might be the winner, but I think When the Wolf Comes Home will definitely give it some competition, as will Buffalo Hunter Hunter. I would peg those. I'd peg those as my top 3, and I think The Lamb will be in that final batch too, is my thought. So now we're in debut novel, so we might have seen some of these before. I think Junie and The Merge, definitely seen in other categories. Homeseeking, yeah, most of these I think we've seen in other categories as well. I think the one I'm most interested in reading, the one I've heard really good things about, is When the Tides Held the Moon by Vanessa Vida Kelly. This one, I think it's historical fantasy, and this is the one I would be most interested in reading if I was picking from this group. The reviews, obviously the actual ratings are really good, but much like I said in the romantasy category, I think Alchemized is gonna take this. It's been so popular, it's had so much hype around it, so much controversy. I just think this one, I will have such a dedicated and loyal reader base that it'll be a shoo-in. I could be wrong, but I think that Alchemized will win it, especially when I consider how strong the romantasy category was for romantasy readers. You might find romantasy readers voting Alchemized in here so that they can pick something else in romantasy. Now, audiobooks are a category that I find really interesting, right? Because you have it in its own category, and I can only assume that the reason for that is that you're meant to base your vote purely on the audiobook, not on the story, the prose, the character, not on anything you would judge any of the other books on. You're meant to be judging the audio performance, as I would understand it. However, I just don't think people will do that. I think voters are gonna vote for the book they enjoyed the most, regardless of the audio performance. I think it's a strange category to have when we don't have graphic novels. Unless you were doing that, unless all of these nominees were the people that were doing something really different with their audiobooks, maybe really big cast performances or ones that had lots of audio effects in them, but quite a few of these from the looks of it are just regular narration. And while the narrator can do a brilliant job, I just find it such a strange category. And some of these are ones, as I said, that I think are shoo-ins in other categories, so I think they'll get votes more because of the book being popular than specifically the audio narration. Because here we have Alchemized again. Some of the memoir ones might do well because people will be interested if they're narrated by the author. Yeah. So I really don't have anything to lead with here. Again, they might be ones where people will use this to vote for something where they had multiple options. What I've not, I know, said anything about books that I think have been snubbed, but I will say that this year I've been utterly hooked on Dungeon Crawler Carl, and whether you like the books or not, like I personally think they're great, but I know that The lit RPG isn't for everyone. It's the first time I've read it, so I understand people not wanting to try it, and people that try it not liking it, that's completely aside. But those books have blown up this year, and every single, I mean 99% of people that I have seen recommend, evangelically recommend Dungeon Crawler Carl, have said, and you should read the audiobook. So I think it is a bit of a snub that the most recent one, whichever one would fit into the qualifying kind of categories, the inevitable run, whatever the newest one is, I think it is a bit of a snub that that's not here, because I have seen so many people that don't read audiobooks be convinced to try audiobooks because the audiobook is so lauded. I think that's a real, it's one I think should be here, whether you like the story or not. If we're judging it based on the audiobook, which as I said, I don't think people are, but if that is the intention, then I think that the new Matt Dinniman should be in here. Off my high horse. So into the young adult categories, we have the fantasy and sci-fi category. I mean, I'm not going to say right at the very front, but I think Sunrise on the Reaping is a really, really safe bet, and deservedly so. Rebel Witch, probably another, I would say definitely going through to the finals, similar to Oathbound. Again, most of these are on a par with each other in terms of the amount of recognition. Again, a couple of really big names. Obviously we have Marissa Mayer, we have Tahira Mafi, we have Lauren Roberts up here. So there's some really solid YA fantasy writers in here, and quite a lot of them, I'm gonna say, are the kind of later books in a series, which again, I don't know whether that counts for you or against you. You do get a certain amount of loyalty from those readers. The readers that did read it are probably likely to have enjoyed it, likely to vote for it, but a debut pulls in so many new readers that sheer numbers might carry it. I think Oathbound has a really loyal fan base. The Legendborn cycle, I could see that going through. I think Rebel Witch, the Crimson Moth duology, has been really successful, but I think Sunrise on the Reaping will get it. I think the number of people that have read Sunrise on the Reaping and loved Sunrise on the Reaping, and the fact that it was a really topical, really on point book, it was the book of the moment that month, that couple of months that it came out, because I wasn't planning on reading it the month it came out. I thought I'll probably get to it at some point this year, but I was absolutely in no rush. I was like, I'll find it once my library has run through the 50, 100 people that want it. And I ended up buying it, going out and buying it, because everyone in the readathon that I was part of was raving about it, and I just had to be part of the moment. I think that one's fairly safe bet. And then the last category would be young adult fiction, which again, I think we should have one below it. I think we should have middle grade at least, but we'll ignore what I think. Julie Soto, this might be an interesting one, the Thrashers, because Rose in Chains is out this year as well. Obviously that was in the romantasy category, I want to say, but I do think that her kind of profile is quite high this year. She's having quite a moment because of Rose in Chains. I could see that kind of bleeding through to the Thrashers, a lot of people having picked this up because they were interested in her other book as well. People that maybe normally wouldn't read YA contemporary picking this up. I think Adam Silvera is always a relatively safe bet in terms of numbers, and this is a series. It's a sequel to a very popular book, which I suppose can play in its favour or not. This is this is kind of the opposite of the romantasy category, where again they feel roughly on par with each other, but their ratings on average are much lower, both in terms of number of books read and the average rating. I don't know that there's anything here that massively stands out to me. I think I would pick The Thrashers as my most likely to win it, but quite honestly, it's not from the hype I've seen around The Thrashers, it's the hype I've seen around the author. But yeah, so that's my thoughts on the categories. I think the categories themselves, the categories that we are given, are interesting and worth talking about. I especially think that the fact we don't have a children's category is a real shame and something we should have. I would like that graphic novel category to come back as well, especially when you consider that we do have an audiobook category, so format is something we're considering. But that I can be persuaded on. I think not having a children's category is a little bit ridiculous. I don't know the thinking behind that. I know that, like, we're looking at YA, and the YA contemporary doesn't seem to get as much, the numbers aren't as high as some of the other genres. Maybe that's the thinking, but it still seems like something we should still be championing. In middle grade, in picture books, we should be champion reading in children, and I know it would probably be the adults that would vote for it, but I still think it's worth doing. So let me know what you think on that. Are there any categories that you think, are there any categories you could get rid of? I know romantasy is a little bit of a kind of sticky wicket, but I don't mind it being there at all. It's so popular that I think it would be silly not to have it. Like, as much as you can debate whether it's a genre on its own, you have to also be aware that if that's what people are reading, that's what people are reading. So I wouldn't get rid of any of the genres, I don't think, but I would add to them. So let me know if you would add anything or take anything away. In terms of the selection within those genres, I don't think I'm massively surprised by anything. I think the books that I expected to be here are here, apart from, as I said, the audiobook category I find strange anyway, but I especially do find it strange that I at least, whether it would win is irrelevant, I at least think the Dungeon Crawler Carl series, there must be one book, probably the most recent book, must qualify, and I think I would put that in here. In the fantasy section, The Strength of the Few, the numbers on it are pretty low because it's only just come out, but I still think it will get the votes because it's been so anticipated. Let me know what you think. Let me know if you agree with me. If you disagree with me, I am more than happy to be told I'm wrong, especially if these are your genres. I'd love to know what you think. And I hope I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye.